Hello class and welcome as we begin our exploration in world civilizations. The first stop in our course is going to deal with several different religious faiths. It's important to note that these religions are going to be the foundation for a lot of what happens in world civilizations. Political changes, conflicts, cultures, a lot of these things are going to be rooted in faith. So it's essential that you understand the background, especially of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Please title your notes for today, The Birth of Monotheism. Just as a reminder, the way that notes are structured in this course, you will be taking notes on the slides that have stars on the top of them. The same thing goes for questions. So if you see a question and there's a star on the top of the slide, you will either be answering that in your notebook or in the chapter syllabus. So just to provide a quick overview, we're going to begin our course by talking about the Abrahamic faiths. And these are important because they'll be some of the first to celebrate monotheism, or only one God. These religions include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's important to understand, too, that these religions are essentially intertwined. They are the continuation of the same narrative. Oftentimes people think of these religions like in contrast to one another, especially when it comes to Islam and Christianity, but in reality they're one long story, starting with Judaism and leading all the way to Islam. So you may be wondering, why does this matter? Why cover these religious faiths in a history course? So as of 2012, 57% of the world's population did identify as seeing themselves belong to one of the three Abrahamic faiths. 14 million people identified as Jewish, 2.2 billion identified as Christian, and 1.7 billion identified as Muslims. So you can see even today, religious faith is enormously important in the lives of many people. In the United States, religion has become less prevalent in the modern era, but if you travel to different parts of the world, you will see that religious doctrines really guide a lot of decision making and policy and a lot of things like that. So just to start us off, this is also in your course syllabus. Take a moment and answer this question to consider. Using your prior knowledge, try to list 3 common beliefs that are shared between the Abrahamic faiths. You can pause the video now and jot down your thoughts before continuing. So Judaism is going to begin in the Mediterranean region, and if you don't know where that is, it's right about here. The sea is enormously important because it links together 3 of the major continents where human beings will be living in early history: Europe, Africa, and Asia. So don't forget, the ability to transport oneself during this time is going to be enormously limited. There are no land vehicles for the most part, besides maybe wagons and horseback. People are very isolated. The majority of people never will leave their own villages or their own small towns during their entire lifetimes. So access to the Mediterranean Sea will be important for trade and spreading ideas. So Judaism is really going to begin 3,000 years ago, and it's going to be this faith that eventually gives rise to Christianity and Islam. So it's important to note that the surrounding regions in the Mediterranean were polytheistic. Think of like ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Polytheism is basically worshiping several different deities or gods. So just so you can get it down, polytheism is many gods, poly meaning many, and of course monotheism, which will be the Abrahamic faiths, is referring to one God, mono meaning one. So the history of the Jewish people is contained in a text called the Tanakh. You can kind of think of this as like the Hebrew Bible. The first 5 books of the Tanakh are called the Torah, which is probably the part that you're most familiar with. And you'll see going forward that Christianity is largely going to be an extension of Judaism, a continuation of that narrative. Of course, Jesus of Nazareth is going to be a Jewish man, and from his life, his followers will create Christianity after him, Christ. So the Torah is also going to be contained within the Christian Bible too. This is the portion that we would refer to as the Old Testament. The New Testament would pick up, obviously, with the life of Jesus. So there are some significant parts of the Torah and Bible that you should become familiar with, only because you'll see that a lot of conflict, again, is governed by the Bible and how it's interpreted. The first book is called the Book of Genesis, and it highlights God's creation of the world and mankind. It talks about the conversion of Abraham, for whom the Abrahamic faith is named. And it also documents Abraham's descendants being enslaved in Egypt. So this is really going to be the beginnings for these religious faiths, and you'll see that from here, we'll see the migration of Hebrew people toward the Mediterranean, where our story really begins. So the next book is called the Book of Exodus. Exodus meaning to leave or depart. In this part of the Bible, Moses leads the Hebrew people from their enslavement in Egypt toward the Mediterranean coast. You might be kind of familiar with this story, you might not, but according to divinity, Moses basically asks the Pharaoh to release his people, and several plagues descend on Egypt until the Pharaoh releases them. The Nile turns to blood, gnats, flies, frogs, locusts all infect the city. Darkness falls over Egypt, and then ultimately the firstborn son of each Egyptian dies. So eventually, the Pharaoh allows the people to leave. This is the famous scene where Moses parts the Red Sea according to the Bible and according to the Torah, and the Hebrew people make their way toward the Mediterranean coast. Historical evidence does back up this migration. Of course, the specifics, like the plagues and the parting of the Red Sea, are a matter of religion, but there is evidence that demonstrates that people did move from Egypt to the Mediterranean coast about 3,000 years ago. So what I would like you to do, this is included in your Chapter 1 syllabus, take a moment and read through this primary source. This is from the book of Exodus. And once you do, respond to this question. What examples in present-day Western society reveal a continuing influence of the Ten Commandments and the Abrahamic faiths? So, of course, you've heard of the Ten Commandments before, but they're still largely entrenched in the world that we inhabit. In the book of Exodus, Moses ascends Mount Sinai and, according to religious faith, receives the Ten Commandments from God. He makes a covenant with God, saying that his people will follow the Ten Commandments, and in exchange, God will lead them to the Holy Land. To this day, the region of Judea, Holy Land of Israel, is still really important to Jewish people. It's still really important to Christians, and you'll see that a lot of the things that happen in history are going to be connected to this. So these become the Jewish kingdoms of Israel and Judea. And just to show you where this is, you can see it's right about here. So if you look toward the south, you can see where Cairo and Egypt are. The Hebrew people are going to migrate northward up into those regions of modern day. So once again, the Holy Land is still largely significant. By the end of this course, we'll talk about some of the conflicts that are happening in that zone. It is located in the Middle East, and it's a sacred place for both Jewish people, Christians, and it's also significant for Muslims as well. All of the faiths that we're going to talk about in the Abrahamic categories are going to stem from Judaism. So you'll see how Judaism spreads into the Roman Empire, how Christianity forms, and then how ultimately Islam is going to develop in the Middle East. So take a moment. I want you to complete the background reading in the syllabus. It's labeled Background Reading A, and then complete these questions. What was the Jewish diaspora? What is anti-Semitism? And how far can anti-Semitism be traced back? Pause the video here and answer these questions. So now that you've answered these questions, let's just go through them together. The Jewish diaspora is going to refer to the movement of Jewish people from the Holy Land outward, especially into Europe. Anti-Semitism, you're going to see very strongly in our next lesson, is the anti-Jewish sentiment that's going to be developing in the Roman Empire and really all throughout Europe. And anti-Semitism can be traced back all the way into the time of ancient Rome, when Jewish people started to make their way into the empire. Just to show you on a map, this is what the Jewish diaspora would look like. So you can see here that this is the Holy Land, and you can see the movement of Jewish people out into Europe, Northern Africa, and into the Middle East. This is where a large part of the conflict is going to be taking place tomorrow, as Jews come into conflict with the polytheistic people living in ancient Rome.